So you're thinking about selling a house and you can't remember how much it costs to actually get it done. Stick around and we'll go over that. Welcome back, guys, and the first thing that we need to talk about when you're considering selling your house is the price of the house, right? This is going to be instrumental. Now, this is where a good local real estate agent is going to come into play, and he's going to do what they call a comparative market analysis for your area. Pull some comparables to see what how the market is actually doing. Is the market, is there an uptick in your neighborhood? Is there a downtick? And where the price actually is. Now, remember, when appraisers come out to look at the house, once you get it under contract and the house is actually being sold, the appraiser is going to come in and he's going to actually do a real-time assessment of the house and actually determine value. Now, this number should be close to what the real estate agent, real estate agent actually gave you. The real estate agent is not the appraiser. That's just a comparative market analysis. It's a pretty good indication. So a really professional real estate agent is going to dial that number in as close as humanly possible. But again, it's a guesstimate, as a professional guesstimate, whereas the appraiser is really going to assign the value. And now that's going to be the first thing that needs to happen. Now, the next thing you need to determine is the commission. How does commission work? Because that's an added expense to the seller there, right? So because the seller typically pays for the commission for the agent. Now, typically, that's like a whole different scenario there. But typically here in the state of Texas is about 6%. And for the most part, and depending on price point, that's going to vary. So very loosely, it's going to be 6%. But remember, the listing agent doesn't get to keep the 6%. That percentage is split between both agents, because the selling agent is typically the buyer's agent, is bringing the buyer to the deal. He's going to split the commission 3% to the listing agent and 3% to the buying agent. Okay, and that's depending on what the price point of the house is what's going to determine what that number actually is. Now, the next thing that you guys are going to have to consider is the property taxes for up until the point of the sale. Unless you paid the property taxes for the entire year, then up until that sale, let's say you're selling the house half the year. So half the year you're going to get a rebate back because you've already paid half the year taxes, and then the buyer will incur the rest of that year. However, if you will pay. If you haven't paid in advance, then what you're going to do is you're going to pay up until that point, right? And then that's when you're no longer liable for that. So that's another thing that you want to consider, and make sure that you're factoring that in when you're actually getting ready to sell your house. Okay, so the next thing that you want to consider is when you're getting these contracts that are coming in, typically the buyers are going to ask the seller to contribute towards seller contribution towards closing. That's what it's called, seller's contribution towards closing. And typically, let's as an example, if it is $10,000 for their closing costs, they're going to want to try and split that with you 50%. Now, that's a negotiable item. You can kind of go back and forth a little bit with that, or just say, no, I'm not going to contribute anything to your closing. But just be aware that typically that's what's going to happen. So that's something that you might want to factor in the beginning process, right? So this way, as you're building out your net, pushing forward, that's a good number to know. Next thing that the buyers are going to typically ask for is a home warranty. Now, a home warranty is typically for 1 year. And depending on the price point of the house and the size of the house, a good home warranty will cover about $500. Will cover most major appliances and most things that tend to break down during typical ownership of a home. So $500, $600 max is pretty much going to cover everything in the house. And so you will see that as part of the offers that come in. So it's going to be typically $500 home warranty that the seller will pay at closing. Like this is a fee that if the seller agrees, will pay at closing. Now, the next option that you might consider would be like a for sale by owner, meaning you're going to sell it yourself. Now, this one's going to be a little bit more interesting because you can save 6% of the commission typically. But what happens then is you're going to have to do everything yourself. Basically, you become a full-time real estate agent while you're still holding down a job. And if you're looking to save money, then maybe this would be an option for you. However, I would caution you that for sale by owners, now you're dealing with the market directly. And whenever, in my experience, whenever a seller is selling directly to the market and they're putting a sign in the yard, they're advertising, and they're bringing buyers to the table, typically when the market is responding to the seller himself or themselves, they're looking for an extreme discount. So just be careful with that, and just be prepared to know that some of the upfront expenses that you would have saved in commission are going to come quickly as a result of you attempting to sell it yourself. So that's something you'll have to calculate for. And additionally, you're probably going to be receiving a lot of lowball offers to begin with, just because the market tends to do that when they're dealing directly with the sellers. Okay. Now, in the contract, the next item that you want to consider is title policy. So in the state of Texas, we close at title companies. Now, it could be the seller paying for it. It could be the buyer paying for it. Now, it's negotiable. However, most of the time what you'll see is that the buyer's going to ask the seller, most of the time, not always, but most of the time you'll see the buyer asking the seller to pay for the title policy, and then the seller gets to choose where they want to close for the title company, which is great. However, that's an added expense, and it's an expense that you'll need to know. Now, you can talk to your local real estate agent. They'll give you a ballpark figure on what that might be, or you can call your local title company just to kind of see what that would cost, you know, knowing that you're getting ready to put your house on the market. Now, one of the last things that I would say is going to be the survey. So sometimes we buy a home and we get a survey ourselves. So the survey is in my name. It was drafted up for me because I'm the owner. Now, as an option, I get to take that survey and deliver that to the buyer, and it'll save them, it just depends on price, $500 to $1,000. Just depends the price point of the house. On the purchasing of the house, you would give them what we call a T47 document, just basically stipulating that we didn't move the fence, there were no encumbrances or in the area, and this has to be notified. But you can gift that to the buyer. You know, when I'm working with the buyers, I always recommend for the buyers to buy their own surveys, so this way that they're protected. But as a seller, this could be a bonus to give to the buyer. Say, yeah, I'll give you this, I'll give you my existing survey, and you can save yourself a little bit of money there. It's part of negotiating and offering that up. It does help put the contract together and offer a negotiation. So that's but however, if you don't have a survey, sometimes the buyers will ask for that and replace. Say, you know, as part of this offer, I am asking for a survey. So that's something you might want to, worst case scenario, take into consideration for yourself as well. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of expenses that are associated with selling your house. You have to get yourself ready, start taking into account a detailed account on what's going on and how the bottom number is. Now, for what I typically do for my clients when we're getting ready to put the house on the market, I'll do what they call a net sheet analysis. In addition to the comparative market analysis, we'll sit down, discuss the numbers, and see how that actually plays out. If the numbers make sense, then we'll push forward, put a timeline on it, and start working from there. So if this is something that you're interested in and you're looking to put your house on the market and you'd like to have a conversation, you know, my information is in the description below. Otherwise, get with your local real estate agent in your local area and start asking some of these questions, and you can put it together, and then this way you're planning ahead of time, which will help you understand what expenses are associated with getting ready to sell your house. Okay, guys, I hope you find this beneficial. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out, and I look forward to seeing you guys here pretty soon. You guys take care.